When you have more assets than liabilities, what do we call that? Net worth or equity, right? Either one. When you have more liabilities than assets, what do we call that? Debt. Most people collapse the word liability and call it debt. You can actually be in equity, and 99% of the population would say you're in debt. So if I buy a business or a piece of real estate, I borrow 100 grand, it's worth $200,000. That borrowing of the 100 grand is not debt. That's a loan. It's a liability. It may sound like semantics, but it will completely change behavior.
Let's talk about, there's like 4 different systems out there that people are using to tackle their debt.
Yeah.
And some of them work.
Don't pay it and go bankrupt.
Yeah, you can go, yeah, or you can just do it haphazardly. Yeah, so don't pay it. I guess that's the 5th one.
Yeah.
Just don't pay it and go bankrupt.
Get massive student loans and they don't get a job, and then just default. But they'll still come after you.
Those all are not good strategies.
No.
So anyway, I mean, some people they have a haphazard approach to everything in their life. They're money avoiders, and so, they pay their bills and they don't have a system. And so like you say, it's a shotgun approach. They don't really know where they're funneling their money. But there's really 3 systems out there that I've been, aware of that people are using very successfully at paying off debt, and each of them has their merits.
Okay.
One of them is called the debt avalanche, which is a system where you focus on the loan with the highest interest rate, and you line up all your loans from highest to lowest interest rates, and you target the one with the highest interest rate.
Yep.
The second one is called the debt snowball.
Not my favorite. Okay, debt snowball.
I don't love that one either.
Yeah.
The debt snowball is one that was developed by a gentleman out in Tennessee. And
Davy Ramsey?
Davy, Mr. Ramsey. And
he's good for the train wrecks. If you're a train wreck, he's got good advice. Now, this diversified investment portfolio is going to disappoint you, but his whole path to get out of debt by living off rice and beans, if you're a train wreck, he's really good.
It works because he focused on the psychology of the person, and so he'll line up all your loans from smallest to biggest, and he'll pay off the smallest one, and as soon as you pay that off, momentum and snowball until all the debts are paid off.
Cool.
Now he goes a little bit extreme in the event that all debt is evil, all debt's bad. You want to
put your credit card in a freezer and block of ice, and blah,
live
blah,
off
blah.
rice and beans while you do that.
I didn't notice his website took credit cards back in the day, though.
Did it really?
I don't know if it still does.
I don't think it does anymore, but
it's very important, pertinent information for you guys.
That's right.
Just trying to poke other people that teach finance. I don't know.
That's right. So I was intrigued with the psychology of his system. Paying off debt, based on the lowest to smallest, highest balance. And
remember, we worked with Jessica Marsh, and she used to follow his system, but lived pretty miserly and miserable because it was all about like every dollar had to have a name.
Scrimping and scraping.
And living in a house they didn't want and driving cars they didn't want.
Right.
I'm just going to say that we're kind of badasses, and then we took Jessica, we saved her $2,500 a month with what we're about to teach you. Then we saved another $2,500 a month saving tax. And then we had them buy this dream house that was on a big farm that I went and visited. They had chickens, bees, a horse, and then built up their practices, and now she gets to take a 3-year sabbatical when her husband
I didn't know he was going on a sabbatical.
Yeah.
Wow.
I took her to a Metallica concert recently in Birmingham.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, good for her.
I went to speak and then went to a Metallica concert.
It's good to hear that this system...
That's what I do. You got hair like this, you got to go to a Metallica show. That's how it works.
Right. This can be a game changer, honestly. And about 8, 9, 10 years ago, I was going through a period of time where I was, kind of struggling a little bit because I had, accumulated a little bit of real estate loans. Didn't really know Garrett.
Didn't listen to my advice. I was like, don't invest with that one dude. You're gonna lose it all.
I did lose it all, unfortunately.
I hate to say I told you so, but
right.
You could have been eating jam that whole time.
It was before I met you, Garrett. So I mean, what do you do?
Yeah.
So anyway, I developed this system called the cash flow index, which is a system that allows you to determine the most effective, most efficient way to pay off your loans.
Yeah.
And what we do is we'll take a look at each of your loan balances. And there's a simple formula that we use. You take the balance of your loan, and you're going to divide it by the minimum monthly payment. Yep. Not annual payment,
balance,
but monthly.
Minimum monthly payment.
Correct.
Spits out a number.
The
smaller the number, the worse at effectiveness and efficiency of the loan.
Correct, yes.
The bigger the number, the better.
Think basketball. If you're scoring 50 points, that's right. You score 50 points in the NBA and you're going to lose that game for sure, every time.
Yeah.
So the smaller the number, the worse. And we usually say that if you have an index less than 50, that you're in the danger zone, which means you got to pay off that debt now. Your hair's on fire. My hair's been on fire a lot, as you can see.
Your head's a lot older than you are.
It probably is.
That's what I figured out.
That's right.
Your head's like 80.
The rest
and
of
you're
me
like 40
40,
something.
yeah. I'm 45, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we put all your loans in the system, and you spit out that number, and then what we'll do is we'll line up all your loans and liabilities based on that cash flow index. And then instead of using a shotgun approach,
every loan but
the one that has the lowest index.
Yeah.
Well, let's say
so ignore the interest rate and focus on the cash flow index. The cash flow index will take into consideration the interest rate, but not as the sole piece. And someone is going to go through this, and you're going to find out your lowest cash flow index is a 0% interest rate loan. And you're going to be like, why would I pay off a 0% interest rate loan? Because we're looking at the bigger picture here. We're considering debt to income. We're considering cash flow. We're considering like freedom and safety. It's not just one aspect.
It's not. So an example, and we worked with a gentleman quite a while back, 5-6 years ago. His name was Jordan Cooper. He's actually, great guy. Dentist out in Arkansas, if I remember right. And he came into our office, and he was in a cash crunch like I haven't seen before. The guy he was
expanding quite a bit,
growing the business like crazy. And what I did is I did a kind of a detailed analysis of all of his loans, and we found out that there was like 10 of them that had an index below that threshold of 50. And we're like, we got to get rid of this quickly. And so we had a quick triage. We talked about a couple different options. We ended up taking out a larger loan, business loan, at a much lower interest rate. So a lot of his interest rates on his loans were 8-10%. We consolidated all that debt into a single loan. The complexity of his life went out. The interest rate on that loan was about 5.25%. And he freed up $17,000 per month, not per year, but per month in cash flow. I mean, can you imagine what kind of difference that would have in your life?
What a gangster this guy is, huh? That's a gangster move, $17,000 a month.
He was happy with us.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. When he says debt consolidation, he's not going to a debt consolidation service and harming his credit or doing something like that. He's simply restructuring his loans. Could you use a car loan that's a more efficient loan than a credit card? Could you use and refinance that? Could you refinance a home and pay off a business loan? There's like different ways that you can restructure these loans to improve your cash flow index. You're not just stuck with the cash flow index that you have.
Exactly. So we just simply restructured some of his loans, and he was able, he had told me beforehand that he had a really, really hard time saving money for the future. He just couldn't do it. He couldn't even live wealthy today.
That, huh?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think he was redirecting $10,000 a month into his wealth capture account. He also, he loved to spend, so I think he was spending quite a bit of money on enjoying himself,
he also
living
really
wealthy.
Nice gifts. He gave me a nice big old paleo basket. I attempt to eat paleo, it's just that there's non-paleo food that tastes really good.
I love it.
But I buy paleo stuff and then just sneak a little ice cream in here and there.
Exactly.
Non-paleo.
Love it.
Sorry, Rob Wolf.
So anyway, this is a system that we've used successfully with thousands upon thousands of people here at Wealth Factory. And I don't know what the number looks like. About 7 or 8 years ago when I was running the numbers, it was like we had helped people pay off over $20 million worth of debt. And we'd help them free up, on average, about $2,700 per month.
That's just you, man. We got other coaches.
That was like
that's just you, right?
6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
I guarantee it.
Because we got Tim, we've got Reeves, we've got Wade, we got a crew doing this kind of stuff for you. So use this cash flow index. Pay the institutions less money, keep more, shave off the time that it takes to pay these things off. It'll boost your credit score, your confidence in your wealth capture account.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to be on Miracle Whip. You can have jam.
I thank you, Garrett. Yeah? This is really nice.
I just, I'm so generous. Look at that. It's like, it was a big deal.
This is more than I've had yet in my lifetime.
All right, cash flow index, loan balance divided by minimum monthly payment. Categorize all of them. Only pay extra to the one with the lowest cash flow index. If it's a really high cash flow index, you might not even pay anything extra to it in the future because you might go, well, I'm going to sell my house in the future anyway and I've got enough money earning an interest stashed away. It really comes down to personal preference and your own peace of mind. If things are dragging your peace of mind down and you're finding yourself in scarcity, it's probably something you have to pay off. So look at the economics through the cash flow index and then consider your personal preference. For me, I have no loans other than my mortgage. And that's because I am not going to live there forever. It is a house that I'm going to sell, and I've got the cash to pay it off, but I don't want to tie that cash up. So, cash flow index, improve that, improve your life, build a life that you love. Pay yourself rather than the institutions, keep more money, and then buy some jam. So let's talk about this cash flow index and how it works.
Okay, so the cash flow index is really at the heart of it. It's a way that we can analyze each debt from a cash flow perspective, which is exactly the way the banks and lending institutions analyze loans.
Right.
They teach us to focus on an interest rate so that they can focus on cash flow. We need to focus on cash flow.
Right. So if you only focus on the interest rate, that may be a fool's errand. That might not be the fastest and best way to get rid of these loans. So if you have more than one loan, what you want to do is write down these loans individually. What's the loan balance? And then you want to divide it by the minimum monthly payment. Not what you're currently paying, but the minimum monthly payment with each loan individually. So loan balance divided by minimum monthly payment, that's going to spit out your cash flow index. Now, if that index is less than 50, I call it the cash hog.
Yep.
You have a cash hog on your hands. It means a high payment in relationship to a relatively low balance. Great situation for the bank and financial institution because they're getting a lot of cash flow without a lot of their capital at risk, right? But if it's above 100, that's a more efficient loan, meaning, okay, you have a decent amount of money that you've borrowed with a relatively small payment in relationship to that. Now, somewhere between 50 and 100, I'd call that the danger zone, or the, maybe where we look at is there a structure that you could go through to improve your cash flow index? But let's just go through this and why it's so simple and the methodology of how to use it.
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity of it is just that simple formula that you gave them. It's so easy to quickly identify which loans are cash efficient for us and which loans are cash efficient for the bank. Once we identify that, now we have complete control over those payments, and we can prioritize which ones to pay off, prioritize the payments that we're going to make. I see what I call it the flock chute of debt repayment, right? Where people say, well, I've got all these loans and I'm going to pay an extra this much to each loan, and they feel like they're making a lot of progress.
I call that the shotgun approach.
Yep.
Right? You're just like, you shoot and all of it goes there. It's like, okay, whichever loan was due earliest is what okay, I paid extra because that extra money. Then the next one you pay extra to. It's a slower, more risky process. Like what we're really teaching in Win Then Play is economic independence. Economic independence is creating enough recurring revenue, which is known as cash flow, to cover life's basic expenses. So sometimes it's hard to create that cash flow, and some of the easier things to do would be to lower the expenses, but not through budgeting and cutting back and elimination, simply through efficiency, through what you could do with the cash flow index to eliminate an expense, not because you cut back and enjoy life less, but because you deliberately and intentionally attacked it in a way that helps you to lower that bar, right? When it comes to standards, we want to raise the bar. When it comes to economic independence, we want to lower the bar so it's easier to get over or to jump over. I don't jump very high, so that kind of helps me out, right?
Perfect.
All right, so let's say you've got 5 loans, and one of those loans is a 30. The other loans are in the 50s, 60s, or over 100. So tell them what to do.
So you're going to focus all of your efforts towards loan repayment towards that cash flow index that's a 30. Now, the other thing about it too is depending on the balance or the size of that loan, it comes back into control of the money. So if it's $100,000 that I owe and I can only afford to put $1,000 a month extra towards that loan, it's going to take me quite a few years to pay that off. So I don't necessarily want to make that $1,000 a month payment to them every single month, right? I'd rather put the $1,000 a month in my own account, earn money on that, use it for growth, and then let that grow till I have a big enough balance to pay the bank off.
Just be careful. You're not going to go put that in the stock market or mutual funds or some speculative investment like cryptocurrency. We want something that's stable. We want something that's fairly liquid, meaning it's available to you. You could access that, and that it's not going to be volatile, that because of the economy, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I thought I was doing better, but now I'm not, and it's going to take me longer to pay off this loan. So you'll want to just continue to be a listener to figure this out as we continue to unveil different opportunities, but we want to begin with the cash flow index. You only pay extra to the one with the lowest, but if you find out that that's still going to be years before you pay it off, you want to set up a separate account and start funding that account first, because you want to build up enough in there to be able to write a check to pay this off in one fell swoop while you still have access to cash, liquidity, and a chance to earn interest. So we'll have other podcasts on how you can lower your interest rates, or how you can restructure your loans, or how you might be able to reallocate if you have inefficient or underperforming assets. But right now, we just want to focus on the cash flow index. And look, you might even find that if you have a lot of loans and you're feeling what most people would call deeply in debt, that can be a hindrance for your health, for your sleep, and for productive thinking. So I even have a strategy around that because we want to help you abolish scarcity. It's the greatest destroyer of wealth. And one of the ways you could do it is what I would call the 90-day debt delay,
where you find your cash flow indexes. And if you have one that's a really low cash flow index, rather than immediately putting money towards that low cash flow index, for the next 90 days, where could you invest your money as a business owner to increase productivity and profitability? As an employee, you increase your skill set or increase your ability that would allow you to get a raise and maybe even learn what to ask and what to do in those interviews in order to increase that income, so that you're investing back into yourself so that you become more productive. And then after that 90 days, now you can regroup with an increased income to start attacking those loans. It reminds me of when I was flying out of Newark. So I was flying out of Newark and the pilot got in and said, we're at number 27 for takeoff. I was like, we're gonna be here for a long time. Then they opened another runway that was actually going east, and I was trying to go back to Salt Lake City, but once they got in the air, they just turned around. So we actually went in the wrong direction for 10 minutes, and then we turned around and started heading the right direction, but it was better than sitting on the ground waiting forever. So the 90-day debt delay could feel that way. You're like, well, I'm not actually paying down my debt right now, or not paying down my loans, to be more accurate. Well, the reality is, yeah, but you're now increasing your production. You're becoming more abundant. You're being able to create more value. You're increasing your income, which can make a massive difference over time, rather than falling prey and victim to being in scarcity and only scrimping, sacrificing, saving, delaying, deferring, paying this down, and not having any ability to think more productively.
Absolutely, and I love the cash flow index because it gives us an opportunity to discover what our best opportunity is for our cash, right?
Right.
We can look at that cash flow index and say, well, how much cash flow am I freeing up if I go after all my loans? But if instead I use that money, as you just described, to grow, will that outgrow the money that would have been saved by paying off those loans?
Right. You're going to hear a lot from us. Invest in yourself. First, always, right? So you're doing that now and in the future. You're going to hear us say you want to build up plenty of safety and liquidity, because it's not just so that you can handle turmoil or turbulent times, but it's so that you have cash for the opportunities that come your way. There's going to be opportunities, whether that's to buy a business, whether that's to make the right investment, whether that's to, grow your money, not because of, hey, everyone's doing it, but because something within your expertise, something within your wheelhouse, something within your knowledge. We're all in store for dozens of opportunities over our lifetime. Most people just don't have the cash to capitalize on it. And the best time to be able to capitalize on it is when no one else has access to cash, because it's all tied up in the equity of their home. It's all tied up in paying down one loan that didn't lower a payment. So we're trying to help you get more control over your money, have the proper methodology, have a lot more efficient method, and use and determine with this cash flow index. Now, what I've seen happen sometimes is the one with the lowest cash flow index is a 0% interest rate loan, either a credit card or a car loan. And so people will kind of battle with me or say, well, that doesn't make sense. I would pay off a 0% interest rate when I have a 12% credit card over here.
Absolutely. And the only time it would make sense is if those balances are similar, right? Or the cash flow index on them are similar.
Right.
Then I can understand, like, okay, well, one's a 20
points away,
and the other one's a 22.
Right.
Fine, go after the one with the interest rate. But when there's a big difference, you're going to get so much cash freed up for so little capital invested,
that you can now go attack that next loan with more vigor, with more cash.
Absolutely.
And you've lowered your risk because you no longer have that payment. And we're looking at everything from debt to income. Debt to income is for every dollar you earn, what percentage of that dollar has to go towards your loans, right? And the higher that amount, the harder it is to get access to borrowing, or maybe even better interest rates, because you can't go borrow the money because you've used too much of your debt to income. So if we can lower the bar from economic independence because we pay something off, and then attack the next loan with even more cash that has been freed up, and plus, if we lower your debt to income, you might have access to better loans, and maybe paying off some of these loans actually improves your credit score. An improved credit score might lead to getting better interest rates. We're looking at a much bigger picture here, not just isolated in one single vacuum.
Absolutely, and that's what happens a lot of times with the loan thing, right? It's just get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt at all cost, any and all cost.
Right.
And so they just attack those loans with full vigor. They jeopardize their safety and security. They jeopardize their growth and production and all those things. The cash flow index allows you to get back into control and say, nope, this is the best way for me to handle it. I'm only handling this one. I'm going to do a debt delay. We have all these options that allow that growth and abundance, which will far, far outgrow the benefits of just total loan elimination.
Right, so loan balance divided by minimum monthly payment. Find your lowest cash flow index. After you find your lowest cash flow index, look, how long is it going to take to pay that off? If it's within 12 months, you might just put money directly towards that to pay that down. If it's going to be years and it's going to take longer, you might want to set up a separate account and start saving your money. We'll be able to reference different opportunities and options as we go through a tool called cash flow banking and a strategy that way where you could store your money and get maybe 4 or 5% in a tax advantaged way rather than sitting at 1, maybe 2% in a taxable way in most savings or money market accounts. And to even get 2%, you got to put in a decent amount of money or have access to the right types of banks for that. So we're looking at what are the most efficient ways. You might delay paying any loans for 90 days. Invest back into yourself, in skill set, back into your business if you own a business, or even creating a side hustle where you can start using those dollars to invest in building out the processes, procedures, or the types of things that allow you to earn that extra income. And then when your income goes up, then reallocating towards attacking a loan and paying it down, or reallocating towards putting more money into that savings account or that investment account that's more safe and stable, that then when that grows to a certain amount, you could pay these loans off. So look at those cash flow indexes, understand where you're at, and even if it's a lower interest rate, you might attack something with the lower cash flow index because it's going to free up that cash flow faster to attack the next loan. You might improve your credit score, which means there's going to be more opportunity. We're looking at the big picture, and I'll kind of end with this. I was in Minneapolis. I remember this because I just left Cancun, where it was 82 degrees. We're talking Fahrenheit. Then I flew into Minneapolis, where before wind chill, it was negative 22 degrees. The only conversations we had there were about the weather. Every time I saw someone, they were typically calling someone to come start their car. I met people that they did this for a living because it was so cold. You had to have special tools just to get the car to turn over. And my beard was frozen when I walked outside because I had some like oil in it to kind of shape it. I was like, wow, this is insane. And then now I'm speaking to 400 people. And before I've even really said anything, this woman's raising her hand, which made me think, maybe my fly was down. What was going on? I wasn't sure. But she was pretty emphatic about it. And so I was like, okay, I finally called on her. And she's like, I'm a CPA. And we joined working with your team, 13 and a half months ago. And your team said we'd be able to pay off our loans with a third less time. And that's not the case. Now, I started to consider when she said this, maybe I need to go outside, even though it's negative 22. That's where I really remember the weather. She says, in reality, we only have 18 and a half months left. Now, what did they do? They looked at the cash flow index. They found out which loans to attack one at a time. They then used other funds that were underperforming to pay off higher interest rate loans, which created a guaranteed return and improved their cash flow. They refinanced some of their loans and consolidated them at a lower interest rate, which then allowed a better situation that way, right? So with all of this, it shaved off a lot more than we originally anticipated. And then they took that extra money to pay down these loans that was going towards the other loans that now were refinanced, they were now paid off, and so there's kind of a trickle effect. So I just want to share that story. There's a lot of possibility, but the cash flow index is where it begins.
We've probably heard the statement, avoid debt like the plague, but the problem is, just like 99% of people identify debt as the wrong thing. So if we look at a balance sheet is your assets versus your liabilities. When you have more assets than liabilities, what do we call that? Net worth or equity, right? Either one. When you have more liabilities than assets, what do we call that? Debt. Most people collapse the word liability and call it debt. You can actually be in equity, and 99% of the population would say you're in debt. So if I buy a business or a piece of real estate, I borrow 100 grand, it's worth $200,000. That borrowing of the 100 grand is not debt. That's a loan. It's a liability. It may sound like semantics, but it will completely change behavior. I'm actually in equity when everybody else says, isn't it risky to be in debt? I don't know, I'm $100,000 in equity from this transaction, not in debt. Debt is a function. Loans are liabilities. Debt is only if you owe more than you have. Net worth or equity is when you have more than you owe. So don't avoid debt thinking that just because you owe, it's debt. So is that the
that
conversation?
distinction?
So I'll just say it this way. There's no good debt or bad debt. You may have heard that before. There's just debt. Avoid debt. Avoid being upside down. But don't avoid loans. Loans are either efficient or inefficient in my mind. So an efficient loan means I've got more cash flow coming in from utilizing that money than if I didn't. Inefficient would be I'm using money and I actually am losing because I'm using that money. And so the thing is, this is a simple rule. Don't borrow to consume. Borrow to have an asset that produces. People in poverty borrow to consume. They put things on a credit card, go on a trip, and then when they come home from the trip, there's nothing left but the loan. That's going to create debt. But other people, when you invest in yourself, when you borrow, when you acquire assets and that's producing cash flow, you're actually building equity, not debt. That could be very
beautiful.
free.
Clap that up.
Check this out, Ryan. This will be
all right.
So
I'm ready to check this out.
Let's say I'm willing to lend you guys money at 0%. How much do you want?
All of
All of it. How fast do you want to pay me back? Right. So now that that's really clear, I'm glad to know where I stand with everyone. But that's a smart thing to do. Now, but whose answers don't change at all when it's 1%? Mine doesn't change. I imagine yours doesn't. You want to know why? Because we all have what's called a cost of money. Our cost of money is our highest net sustainable rate of return. In corporate finance, they call it a hurdle rate. So you look at your hurdle rate before you deploy money and invest. So when you're looking at borrowing, all you have to look against is your cost of money. Now, your business might earn 50%, or you might find an amazing real estate deal that yields you 100% for a period of time, but that's not sustainable. You have to look at what it's actually sustaining, and that's going to be an indicator of whether to borrow or not. Second indicator, this is really important. Second indicator is personal finance should be personal. And don't ever borrow, don't ever invest if it tends to create a scarcity mindset for you. Because your mindset is what's going to create the most value and the most wealth in this world, and you are your greatest asset. So if you start infringing upon your mindset, investing in things that are highly speculative, or even if they're not speculative, you just don't understand it, you can't articulate it in a sentence or two, now all of a sudden, if you're losing sleep, creating stress, you're crowding out productive, creative thoughts because of that scarcity. So if you can borrow and earn more than what it costs you, and it doesn't infringe upon your abundant mindset, then it's going to be a different number for everyone in the room.
A frickin' men on that.
Just imagine that one day you walk out to the mailbox and, okay, even before, let's say that you have a neighbor that they're like, I'm going to do an interest-only loan. And you're like, that's crazy. You're going to have that for the rest of your life. I'm going to pay extra to my mortgage. And you're just getting super aggressive. You're taking all your extra money and doing that. And then 5 years down the road, you guys walk out to the mailbox and you look in your mailbox and you got $1 million check in there. You think, holy shit, this is amazing. I got $1 million. But then you find out your neighbor got the same $1 million. And down the street, everyone else got $1 million. Because the Fed's just printing money. How excited are you that you just spent all that extra money, worked so hard to pay off the home, and then your neighbor just got the $1 million who was able to spend the money when it was worth something? When money is printed, when everybody's getting this extra money, it's devaluing dollars. Yet your payment on that same home is remaining fixed. So it's just becoming cheaper and cheaper for you every single year that you're holding on to it. So if now all of a sudden you decide to give the bank extra money, the first problem with that is most loans are amortized. So you're making an extra payment and it's not lowering your payment. So you're actually lowering the efficiency of your loan with every extra payment. The other problem is how many people actually stay in their home till it's paid off? Most people refinance, they move, and I'm going to tell you, if you get close to paying that off, you're going to get aggressive marketing from the financial institution about how you can upgrade and live in a nicer home, because they'll just have you roll that over and start the 15-year or 10-year clock over. And it is awesome for them because they're in the business of cash flow. That's what banks do. They're in the business of cash flow. And think about their returns. It's pretty substantial because just next time you walk into the bank, look at what the rates are that they're paying you. And then look at the other side of the wall and they'll tell what they're charging you. So they're saying, cool, we're paying you 1%. And we have a great deal on a 4% mortgage today. But it's way better than that. Right, but check. Right, I don't want to get too down. Yeah. But so that's not a 3% return, by the way. If you're buying supplements for $1 and selling them for $4, what's your rate of return on that? Hundreds of percent. Now, if they did the same thing that they tell the average investor to do, they would go bankrupt quickly, which is put money in a 401k, an IRA, or a simple, because there's zero cash flow mechanism to that. What they're doing is trying to convince you to pay them back quicker. Biweekly payments. A lower, like how insane is it? It's a lower interest rate on a 15-year than a 30-year mortgage typically, right? But they just told you it's better for you because you're going to save all this interest. But see, we always are financing, whether you pay cash or whether you borrow. If you borrow, you pay them the finance charge. If you pay cash, you forfeit the right to earn interest. Either way, there's always an interest cost. It's easier to see what the interest we pay rather than the interest we lose, but this is where a lot of wealth is transferred and where there's a huge amount of wealth lost.
There's if you like this, there's a podcast episode that we did called Only Invest in Multipliers. And my philosophy on this is that anything that you can comfortably predict with some amount of reason should be financed, which will free up your dry powder to be able to be put into things that have exponential returns to grow your business or wherever you want to put that. And that's how I have applied that exact same principle.
First place I would invest is a really, really amazing tax team, and then save that money on tax because that's a huge opportunity. Second thing to do, and I do this like as soon as this event's over, is go to your bank, set up a separate account. I call mine a wealth capture account. And then every time you go pay yourself personally from your business, you want to take the top 18% off that account or off that money and automatically sweep it into that account. So this is simply paying yourself first. I don't care if it's a checking, a savings, or a money market account. It's not going to sit there really long time. But see, Wall Street screwed things up where they got people to think about automatic investing. That was never the intention. It was automatic saving, deliberately investing. They jumped the shark and said, oh, just automatically invest. We would never automatically put money into marketing every month, regardless of if it performed over extended periods of time, hoping it works out in the long haul. So the reason you set up this wealth capture account and pay yourself first is because of Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law would say that your income is going, if it increases, your expenses will rise to meet or exceed that increase if you don't have an infrastructure. So the problem with that money just sitting there, it's not earning a lot. So what I do, I take and put it into overfunded whole life insurance. Overfunded because it's going to be cash value rich, protected from liability and bankruptcy in 43 states, multitude of benefits, tax advantages on the growth, but full access to the money along the way. Now, that becomes a storage tank for your money, maybe getting 4 or 5%. And then when that money's growing, when the right opportunities come, you pounce on those opportunities. You invest in real estate. You can use that for down payments. You could use that for infrastructure of your business. I mean, I've used it to buy a TV studio, to buy a business, to invest in real estate many times over the years. And then I put the money back in there. And I know that if the market or anything that I'm putting my money in isn't getting at least 9%, then I'm not going to take it out of that account because I know because of tax advantages and benefits, that's at least what I'm getting. And look, the best investors have always been more like predatory investors than long-term, forget it and set it aside type of investors. We were talking about Ted Turner. Ted Turner sit in cash, huge opportunity comes up because the market starts going down. His cash isn't going down during that time, so he buys TV stations, franchises, a ton of land. You know, so that's, I'm like, pounce on the opportunity when it's ripe and be willing to sit in cash until those opportunities come up. So like Jason's saying, but when you purchase real estate, make money on the buy. And I love that philosophy. If it doesn't cash flow, then it's not an investment, it's speculation. Then the next piece to invest as an entrepreneur is if you can create, this is I think the biggest insider advantage that I could imagine, is if you can create enough cash flow from your entrepreneurial pursuits that don't require your daily involvement, although you're still managing it, meaning anything that you're doing that, like when I'm on stage, that doesn't count. I'm working actively. But when I'm in Italy and my firm's still making money, that counts as entrepreneurial income because it's recurring revenue that doesn't require my daily involvement. Or investment income, cash flow that comes in, whether I'm managing it day by day, I'm still going to monitor it. But if you can get enough income coming in to cover your basic expenses that way, that means that every active dollar you earn from there can go towards buying more assets that create cash flow. And that's how I see people getting a 10-time exploding growth, is because now their lifestyle, they don't have to work directly moment by moment to provide their lifestyle. So that's how I think an entrepreneur should invest.
My question is, how do we pay off our credit card debt? We owe $20,000 in balances. I was thinking of applying for a fixed personal term loan, which we are approved for at 11.9% for 84 months. I'm on Social Security disability of $2,300 a month. My hubby averages $15,000 adjusted gross income per year. We just can't get out from underneath the credit cards. I want to be in somewhat of a financially secure place in 3 years. I know we can do it. We just need some guidance. So let's give Romina and her husband some guidance on what to do with their credit card debt.
You said that the reason he's at $15,000 of income per year is some health issues.
Yeah, there was just a series of unfortunate events that happened that kind of put him in a tough spot.
That's the first thing I look at in this situation is how do we increase income, right? If that's at all possible. Is there, side hustles? I did a phone call this morning. You heard me on speaker. They're making money on their vehicle using Turo.com. They're driving it. They're renting it out 3 times a month, and that renting it out on Turo is paying for the car and cash flowing. So you can always look at existing resources to find out how to be resourceful. One of our mutual friends that's been on the podcast a bunch and YouTube with me, Demi, rented out a room on Airbnb. There's millions of stories of Uber and Lyft drivers like that. Like, you always got to look at, do you have existing resources and things that you can do to be more productive? I started my first car detailing business because my dad had plenty of cleaning supplies in the garage. My mom worked at a credit union. My dad worked at a coal mine, and I cleaned those vehicles. So look at what you have there first. Then we look at the loans. And to me, one of the things that's critically important is called cash flow index, where we take the loan balance, we divide it by the monthly payment. Okay. If this number is 50 or less, we have a cash hog on the hands, right? That means it's a very inefficient loan. If that number is, greater than 100, that's a really efficient loan. It's actually not requiring a very large payment for how much money you've borrowed. So if you're trying to pay something off, you want to know your cash flow index of any loan that you have, because it kind of tells us the priority. Now, in their situation, the 11.9% is high, but at the same time, because she's on fixed Social Security amount of income and her husband's not earning as much income, that's why it's a higher interest rate. Now, did they have other assets or anything else?
She didn't go into details on that.
One of the things I always look for is there other assets that are out there. Could you borrow from a 401k? Could you borrow from cash value? Could you go refinance a car? Right? We're looking for, anytime you have collateral, like cash value has collateral of life insurance where they'll lend you money based upon how much you have. Usually loan interest rates on 401ks are really low. Now, it's not my favorite place to go borrow money, because there's fixed payback periods, and it's all pre-tax dollars that you're paying back with after-tax dollars. So there's disadvantages, but if we can lower the interest rate, we can lower the payment, we can improve the cash flow. Those are things to look at. There's also intra-family loans. We've had people that just borrow from family members because they're sitting on plenty of cash. We've done it for down payments for mortgages and things like that, because now they're earning more than they were in their measly savings account. But at the same time, there's collateral behind it, and they're helping out someone they care about. So I want people to think more resourcefully first. And so 11.9% for 84 months, that's kind of a high payment. Obviously, that's going to be a lot of their income, is going to go to this. So I want to look at those other options.
Now, if she has the option of refinancing a current car loan that her and her husband already have, how would one go about doing that?
Go to your bank or credit union. It's already collateralized, so it's a refinance. Most people don't think about that. They think about buying a car and financing it up front. But if it's paid off, you could always go and get a loan. The car is collateral. It's actually a car loan. So you're going to go talk to wherever you're currently banking at, where you already have an account. Okay.
Now, the other thing I think is really important is understanding the cost of money. Will you go into that a little bit?
Okay. Cost of money is simply the highest interest rate that we're paying for our money is the cost of money. So in her case, 11.9%, if that's where all of her loans, that anytime she spends $1, it's costing her 11.9%, right? So it's the highest amount that we're paying on our money. Or it's forfeiting interest that we earn, depending on what that is. So let's say I know I can earn 5% on my money. I know with really high levels of certainty, 5% is pretty easy to do. Anytime I spend $1, I'm forfeiting the right to earn 5% interest. So it's either, we always have an interest cost, right? We either pay interest if we borrow, or we forfeit the right to earn interest. Either way, there's an interest cost. It's just more obvious, the one that we're paying for, than when we forfeit the right to earn. So our cost of money is kind of that bar that says, at this point, I have to earn at least this much to make it worth my time. Like if you have a 5% loan, and someone comes and says, I can get you 3% guaranteed. Not too exciting because you're losing, right? Because you're paying 5 and you're only earning 3. On the other hand, if you're only paying 3 and you can earn 5, maybe the fastest way to pay off that loan is earn the 5% if it's got predictability, if it's stable, if it's secure. There's a lot of people that erroneously, like, remember your college notes that said, oh, the market's just going to do 12%. Well, if the market was really going to do 12%, the slowest way to pay off a mortgage would be pay the bank extra money. The fastest way would you invest the 12%, and then when it grows, you pay the mortgage off, and you've earned more than you would have saved by paying it down, right? But the reality is the market doesn't get 12%. It doesn't do
Never.
that long term.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of fees and taxes and all sorts of riddled with holes along the way where it goes down. So we have to be really careful. But knowing our cost of money helps us understand whether we should invest or pay off, whether something's efficient or inefficient, effective or ineffective. So I always think about my cost of money before I do something, because there's always an interest cost.
And that's where the cash flow index comes in, is
Yep.
understanding your cost of money.
So knowing your cost of money, it's personal finance has to be personal. For some people, paying off a loan is so critical for them because it brings peace of mind. They feel, oh, I'm finally free. For other people, like, I have a mortgage on my home. I don't have car loans. I don't have a mortgage on my cabin, but I have it on my home because I don't plan on staying there forever. It's really low interest, and in a highly predictable way, I can out-earn it. And I could pay the home off tomorrow if I want to pull it out of my cash values.
Yeah.
Now, other people, they just don't feel comfortable with that. They're going to lose sleep. No savings is worth that, right? So maybe you're just best paying that off, and now you can be more productive. One is the economics, which is your cost of money. The other is your peace of mind, which is just what your personal preference is. And I think we need to take both things into consideration, where some financial gurus just automatically go, pay off your debt or else you're enslaved. The Bible says pay off your debt or else you're enslaved, but most people haven't even identified what debt is. Debt's when you owe more to someone than you have in an asset. When you have an asset worth more than what you owe, that's actually equity. It's the opposite. So my home is worth more than the loan on it. I'm not in debt. I'm in equity, but I do have a mortgage. Now, that's probably blowing a few people's mind. A few people are pissed off right now, and they want to tell me, paying off my mortgage is the best thing I've ever done in my life. I'm not.
Some people get
I'm not
very
crapping
passionate
on
about
it.
that.
If you paid it off, congratulations.
Yes.
I never told you not to. I have no dog in the fight. I don't care. It's just know your options and do what's best for you.
And the peace of mind is a really important factor. I think sometimes gets left out of the equation. It's just like, if you scrimp and you save and you kind of cut back, like, eventually you'll get there and be able to enjoy your life and you'll be able to show up. But I think peace of mind allows us, like, if we consider that in part of this situation and in our lives, it allows us to show up differently in the world. And when we show up with more confidence, because we have peace of mind, then we can create greater value. We can be more creative with our thoughts. We're more open to connecting to other people, which expands our means. So peace of mind is actually, I think, a really important part of deciding what to do with our money.
It's an essential piece.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to move on to a question coming in from Richard.
Okay.
So you've discussed a couple of ways that Romina could pay off her loans. Richard has a specific question. He said, should I follow Dave Ramsey's plan or use a different strategy for paying off my debt faster? I've been doing some research on trying to pay off my debt. I love the idea of the snowball effect, where I pay off the lowest bill first and use the extra income to pay towards the next biggest loan. Do you have any suggestions or comments? I'll let you speak, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions.
That's a good plan. What I like to do is a combination of what's called the cash flow index that we just showed, loan balance divided by monthly payment, and you only attack one loan at a time, pay the minimum to everything else, and it's the one with the lowest. The lowest cash flow index is what you're going to pay the extra to. Now, the difference between that and debt snowball is this takes a little bit of consideration into the interest rate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Not just the
I
payment.
like the philosophy of let's just pay off the one that's the easiest to pay off, the fastest to pay off, because then that's freed up and we got more cash flow. Love that. But this is just going to be an equation that says, well, let's figure out which one's going to be the bigger movement.
Which one
when
should
it
I
frees
tackle
up,
first?
Right?
Yep.
And then in order to really improve it, the 3 R's are restructure, reallocate, and renegotiate. So to restructure a loan, we're looking at, well, what if you refinance your home and pull other loans into it that have higher interest rates, and now you got lower interest rate? What if you what we said earlier, refinance your car and pay off higher interest rate loan? So if you can restructure or refinance loans, you might be able to get better cash flow indexes and therefore pay less in interest. Then the second thing is reallocate. Let's say that you just have an underperforming asset. You have something that's not earning a high interest rate, but you're paying more than what it's earning. Let's cash that thing out, pay off that loan, and then that's going to free up that cash flow. That's going to get you a guaranteed return because you've saved the interest. Or renegotiate. Like if you have a credit card, don't just assume whatever they're charging you is what you have to pay. Call and renegotiate. Ask questions like, hey, what are your best deals? Are there balance transfer deals? If I'm looking to cancel, what can you do for me to keep me as a customer? These types of questions, so you get to the retention department and they lower those interest rates. Or a streamline refinance with your home where you stay with the same company but get a lower interest rate because you have options because interest rates are low. You just have to make sure you have a good credit score, decent collateral, which is cars and homes are decent collateral, right? The right cash flow reporting, so you look good to the bank.
Yeah.
And then good connections, so you're going to the right institutions that specifically deal with what you're looking for. So I would say go with the cash flow index, pay only extra to one loan at a time. But as you do that, look to restructure, look to reallocate, and look to renegotiate the interest rate so that you can actually get ahead even faster.
Okay. So is there ever a time when the snowball method is a good fit for reducing debt?
Sure. It's not a bad method at all. Yeah.
Just always
Helped out a lot of
consider
people.
the cash flow index, the interest rate.
I'm just giving a little bit different take on it. And here's my big concern. If you're trying to eliminate debt, don't get in a scarcity mindset that's all about reduction and sacrifice and scrimping and saving. Look to keep more of what you make, get more efficient. Look to expand your means, like you said. How can you add more value? How can you increase your income so you have more to work with?
Yeah. Amen to that. I remember when I was using the snowball method myself to pay off my Plymouth Neon back in college. and just even after I graduated, my Plymouth Neon, it was purple, just riding in style.
Is Plymouth in business these days? I haven't heard that word for a while as a car company.
I mean, I don't know. I don't keep up on cars.
Okay, yeah.
But maybe it was a Dodge. Who knows? But anyway.
I think it was a Dodge Neon.
Okay. So I was paying off this little car of mine. But I remember spending hours every month.
That's the concern.
Budgeting. And I would erase and I would move money around.
Did you feel
and
inspired?
I would fill my envelopes and it was not inspiring. I wasn't thinking about how to expand my means. It was just me trying to get by.
You've got to start with production first.
Yes.
And reduction second.
Yeah.
Be mindful with your cash. Frugal's fine, but as soon as that starts to turn into miserly, as soon as that starts to consume your thinking, as soon as that starts to be, you miss out on life and you don't invest in yourself and you don't think about impacting others or value creation, that's where it becomes detrimental.
And it was actually really stressful for me, So
I'm just stressful for it. That's what you traded off. You don't have to worry about your debt, but you got to stress about my crap.
Yeah. So I think it's a good starting point. Like you said, Richard, maybe just incorporate some of these other things. And, if I think of investments, if I would have spent the 2 hours a month investing in myself, investing in ways to expand my mind and, grow in deeper ways, I probably would have been more fruitful. So I know that's preaching in the choir. You talk about that all the time, but I experienced that. Right. So I can relate to Richard, and I think it's a great question. So Romina, Richard, we understand credit card debt can be very stressful, and I think it's something that a lot of people deal with. I think there's some stats about how people are just a paycheck or two away from being in a really difficult spot, and so it's easy to reach for credit cards. And so I think these questions, while two of them came in from different individuals, it's a really common thing to wonder what to do with credit card debt. So I think we've given some people some good things to think about.
All right.
So let's help people get out of credit card debt so they can produce more in their life.
3 R's. 3 R's. All right. I like to alliterate.
Okay.
So renegotiate. Yes. Absolutely want to renegotiate. The best way to do that is get your credit score above 760. When it's above 760, you're a better, borrower, so to speak. So you just got to do some basic things there, whether it's, if you have any late payments, get a letter of deletion, get that caught up. Whether that's errors on your credit report, they've got your name spelled wrong. They don't show the right utilization rate, meaning you have a credit card, $5,000 available to you. You haven't you charge $1,000 on it. You're in good terms. But if they don't show that you've got $4,000 left over because they don't show the available balance, it lowers your credit score. So you want to check all three bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Make sure there aren't those errors. Limit your hard inquiries, which is other people checking your credit. You can check yours. That's a soft inquiry anytime that you want. And if you have an installment loan, like a car loan that you're paying on time, that can actually help your credit score. So those are just a couple of really basic things there. Let's get this above, 760, and let's try to renegotiate. If it's a credit card, call and ask if you can do a balance transfer, because you're looking at another company. Say that you're looking to cancel the card because you want to go with a different company, or look for the deals that are out there so you get to the retention department. Get to the right individual, and I think you're going to have a good chance of getting your interest rates lowered. Talk to the first person that answers the phone. They might not have any authority to actually change it. So that's the first R, renegotiate. The second R is restructure. Do you have equity in a home? And you could refinance and pay off high interest rate credit cards, save interest that way. But you got to be careful, because some people just go charge the credit cards right back up, and now they have a mortgage, and now they have credit cards again. So we've got to look at the behavior.
Yeah,
Stova, we got to look at the behavior.
Yes.
You're a very responsible individual.
I try.
Not everybody's as responsible as you. So what got people in the debt in the first place? Trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to fill some void from childhood because they didn't feel worthy enough. Handling, like what I do is I would just binge eat if I was going to do it, hit some sugar. Like that's how I deal with my feelings. That's my adult pacifier. So if it's spending money, we got to get clear about that, because if you're going to do that, don't restructure. Only restructure if you've got a way to be responsible and a separate account to save the money, right? Or you can reallocate. That's the third R. Do you have any cash value? Do you have a 401k? Do you have something else like a CD that's not getting a high interest rate that you could utilize that money to pay off a higher interest rate loan, like a credit card? By paying that off, you should be able to improve your credit score. Improve your credit score, renegotiate other loans. And there's this big trickle effect. So renegotiate, the answer is absolutely yes. But we want to go with the 3 R's, right? Which is restructure, yes, renegotiate, and reallocate. Look for other resources. Now, I've seen intrafamily loans where someone might lend money, and I know some people are like, oh, that would be the worst idea. And for some people, it would be. But for others, it could be a really good scenario where they can get a higher interest rate than they're getting at an institution and lower the interest rate for the family member. So that might be a situation. It might just be going to a different type of loan that gets better interest rates, like a paid off car that gets refinanced and pays off a credit card. Just having collateral and having good credit score helps you out. But it's almost like get your cash flow reporting. Look like a good borrower when you go into the institution, right? Yeah. Get your financial house in order. Watch other videos that we do that way to see exactly what to do there. But there's a couple pieces. What else you got for me?
Well, I'm just, if someone's going in to renegotiate, it's going to be a good idea for them to actually have their credit score in place, like you said. Like have a 760, you said, or 780?
Well, 780 is what I used to say. And I talked to Eric at Credit Nerds, and he said 760 is pretty much the same thing, and he is a nerd of credit. So I said, okay, great, I'll say 760. It used to be back in the day 720, but they did inch it up a little bit after the 2008 credit crisis. So 760 is the number. We gave a few tips of how to improve that. There's actual videos that people can go to that we've got on YouTube that specifically say what to do to improve the credit score. All right, so 760, yes.
Okay.
What else you got for me?
Well, is there any order to the 3 R's? Is there one preferred over the other?
I would go reallocate first. Anything that you have a low interest rate on that you can pay off a high interest rate, that's a guaranteed return. Then I would try to, restructure loans so that you could just get much better interest rates, and then renegotiation would be the last one. Okay. But you know what? I don't know. If you don't have any other assets, maybe you go to renegotiation first. If you don't have a good credit score, maybe restructuring is going to be a lot more difficult. So look at your credit score. I don't care what service you use, go Google it. There's free credit report, annual credit report, Credit Karma. The list goes on and on and on. The key is to know where you're at, because you can't really improve it unless you're aware of it. Yeah. And tons of people have errors. So you want to look for those errors.
And it could be just an extra letter on your name, the wrong apartment number, whatever it is. It could be
Stolbia, like they got an I in there.
I get Stolbla a lot.
Stolbla?
Can you believe that?
Geez, Stobla.
It's not that difficult of a last name, but I get some unique variations of it.
I get Gary a lot when I'm talking to people on the East Coast. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Gary.
I just
you don't
answer
look like
to
a
it.
Gary.
Maybe not. My wife doesn't like when people call me Gary. I don't care. I know who they're talking to. It's fine. If I'm never going to talk to them again, I don't need to correct them.
Yeah. So when someone is looking at paying down their credit card debt, I think you brought up a really valid point of looking at the behavior. So why is it that you feel compelled to, buy expensive things or charge?
Maybe you're sad and you buy something that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just too easy to click something and it shows up on your doorstep. Maybe you haven't looked at your finances from week to week or month to month to know
Is there
how much
avoidance
is coming
there?
in versus how much is going out. Maybe you're married to someone you thought was going to make more money and they haven't, and that's disappointed you. I mean, this is the real stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've really got to look at this.
Yeah.
And what I find is it's usually some childhood thing that we've never addressed.
Of course. It's always
right?
back to our childhood, isn't it?
So we're buying things to impress people that don't even care when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I don't think there aren't very many people, at least I should at least speak for my circle, that are just looking at like, oh, you've made it because you have X, Y, and Z. You know, like we have to just live quality lives that we've determined
Because I got a
ourselves.
record player that you're impressed, huh?
I'm very jealous of this
player.
coffee machine over here of yours,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah, like and there's certain like right now I want to buy a new coffee machine, espresso machine.
yeah,
So what I did was I just said, okay, when I get a full fee for the one-man show, I'm going to take that because it's about 10% of the full fee to get the new. But so it just becomes part of an objective.
yes,
So that it's part of the game, and it kind of like signifies a cool moment. And, you know, because as you know, we're investing a lot into this.
yes,
And we're putting a lot into this channel.
it's gonna be phenomenal.
And
can't
we're
wait.
just up to making a bigger impact, but that doesn't always come with cash flow immediately. So I'm just investing and investing and investing and in a long-term situation. So I don't need to buy certain things. I've got more than I can utilize on a daily basis, right? So sometimes it's just having an inventory of gratitude of what you do have instead of being
a good
upset
reminder.
about what you don't have or what you want or what you think will make you happy. The question is, what makes you happy, right? Credit card debt doesn't typically make people happy. Getting in credit card debt creates temporary happiness sometimes, but long-term misery.
yeah.
So
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just look at the kind of life that you want to create for yourself, and if you don't have the peace of mind, if you don't have the satisfaction in the basics, I feel like it's going to be much more difficult when you get
Look,
to a bigger place.
There's times I've had cash flow crunches. Let's be candid.
Yeah.
So
And most people do.
2008, I definitely did. Had a massive real estate portfolio that I wasn't paying enough attention to. I launched the book Killing Sacred Cows, and I felt like I had to go through some type of crucible or test. Did I believe what I was writing? So now I was like going through the trials and tribulations in my own life at that time. And so when it was June 1st, 2008, I just written all these checks for the PR firm, for the book promotions, for all this kind of stuff. And I was like, it would be irresponsible to have some type of epic anniversary date where I go get a hotel and spend all this money. So we have this little tiny family cabin that was paid off. And what I did was I wrote these cards, these little 3x5 cards with questions. And I blindfolded my wife and I asked those questions as we went up to the cabin. And it got really cool to know each other and talk about like, when was the moment you knew you loved me? And, you know, and when was it for, you know, and vice versa. And then when we got up there, I just had, you know, rose petals kind of scattered and we just had some cool music. And even though it's just this little, like crappy little cabin, we just had a cool experience. It didn't
Yeah.
require a lot of money to have something extraordinary.
Right. Because
And-
you can create a phenomenal experience from little.
It's
you don't
still
have
one of
to
the
have a
top
lot.
ones that we remember.
Yeah.
Right. So, so what can you do to be more resourceful during those times? And then by being more resourceful, you're not racking up credit cards. You're not financing a lifestyle that doesn't exist. It kind of reminds me of on Conan O'Brien, he had Louis C.K. on, and he talked about the days where you had to go in and get cash from a bank, right? And you'd have to write a check out to cash. And he says, and then credit card machines were these big clunky things. They'd be like,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and then,
I
you know,
remember those.
and he's like, and when you ran out of money before credit cards, you just stop doing stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, okay. And I think
It wasn't
sometimes we
even an
spend
option.
optimism. Like, oh, you know, or we think these things will make us happy. But what they really do is make us more indebted. And so I'm not saying that I know psychologically why everybody gets there, but don't try to fill a hole in your life
Definitely.
and finance it.
Right.
Really get clear about like, you know, like there's just some basic things that you could do, but don't make these moves if you haven't addressed the root issue.
Yeah.
Hey, do you have high interest rate credit cards? Is cash flow tight and you hate paying those massive interest rates? Well, what are your options? Should you do a balance transfer or should you negotiate better interest rates? This applies to anyone that has ever had a loan, and the ways to keep more and pay the institution less, that's what we're about to unveil.
This is Alan's question today.
All right.
I think it's going to help a lot of people. I think this is pretty common, and I've said this before in other episodes, but credit cards can be a pretty difficult thing to deal with, because sometimes we get in desperate situations and we
Just
need
say
access
evil.
to money.
It could be evil.
Yeah, and I asked you before we started recording, how can they get by with charging such a high interest rate? And I know we signed the agreement and we agreed to it, but some of these percentages that we see come in through Ask the Money Nerds and all the questions are really high. Like this one's 22.99%. We've even seen like up to 27% interest rate. So it's just...
The credit card companies originally, these are like 6 or 7% interest rate. And they're pretty strict about how they gave it out. And then they did the analysis. Someone at an Ivy League school or someone on Wall Street or whatever it was like, hey, even if we really have a high default rate, charging higher interest rates will make us more money. So they didn't really consider the impact on people. They only thought about profit. So yeah, they're crap. They're crap, Stolva.
Is there no like regulatory organization
I'm sure there
on
is.
this?
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Then let's just get to Alan's question so we don't go down a rabbit
All
hole.
right.
Okay.
You're fired up.
I know. Okay. I just want people to live in freedom. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Let's answer Alan's question. He says, hello, Garrett and Money Nerds. I hope this question finds you well. I'm doing well.
I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah.
It's a big week of content this week.
Yes. Lots going on.
Filmed a video course, did an audio book, and now we're doing these. Did you do anything else?
Well,
Did my play?
Your play,
Yep.
your book, your regular business meeting. So the week was
Fished.
stacked. Yeah. So, okay. So here we go.
So now that everybody's caught up,
What was that?
we'll read the
Yes.
question.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into it. It says, I'm not working at the moment due to the COVID situation. I only have $2,000 in my bank account and I owe $7,500 in credit card debt. The APR on the credit card is 22.99%.
You had a hard time even saying that.
I know. It sends shivers down my spine. Would it make more sense to do a balance transfer or call the credit card issuer and try to work something out with them? And if calling the issuer makes more sense, what should I say or ask them? If there's another option or solution I can make, what would it be? I really appreciate your time and advice and hope to hear from you soon. Alan, we have some answers for you. So,
All right. I'll just say right out the gate, we have a cool free resource, wealthfactory.com/credit. And I remember recording that because a bunch of the people on the team, we did in the middle of the office, came up and started asking questions afterwards because I'm interviewing 2 credit experts, and then there's some cool resources. So that's no charge. Well, it's you exchange your email for it, right? So we can stay in contact, but wealthfactory.com/credit. I would start by making the phone call to the credit card company and saying, hey, can I talk to the deals department? Hey, I'm considering a balance transfer, but I'd like to talk to you guys first, or I'm thinking about canceling. You want to get to the right department. The first person that answers the phone probably doesn't have the authority. You have to go to the retention department
yeah.
and just see what they're willing to do.
Yeah, be patient. You might be transferred 2, 3, 4 times to get to the person, right?
If you balance transfer, you might be able to get a 0% interest rate, but you also might have a provision that if you miss a payment, it could be even higher than what you're paying right now. So you want to be really careful about that. And I mean, like miss it by a minute, might not even show up on your credit report. It's just that you didn't pay it perfectly on time. So you want to be careful about that. The second thing you want to look at is how much are they going to force you to pay to consider it, like your minimum payment. And sometimes you move it and they make that a higher payment. And so in this time where there's tough cash flow, you got to be really careful about that. But let's look at the 4 C's first off, right? If you use these 4 C's, it's going to help you get the best interest rates. Number 1 is your credit report or credit score. If you can get your score above 760 and make sure your report's clean, that's going to be really helpful. The second thing is collateral. So if you have a paid off car and you could refinance that, you can get much better interest rate than what is being paid here, right? Even if that car is not worth a ton of money, I would look into that, or any other collateral like refinancing a mortgage. The third C is the right cash flow reporting. So if you have good financials and you're going to a bank, it's kind of like when you go get life insurance and you get good blood report, right?
Yeah.
And then last is connections. Certain institutions work better with certain, situations than others. So I think, like I remember buying a car for my mom years ago. Maybe I just said that so I sound like a really good son, but I remember we went to a credit union because they were a full 50% lower interest rate than any other place. So it was like 1.5% instead of 3% or something like that. So that's what I mean by the connections. So that's going to help out a little bit there. The next thing is, if you stay with the existing company, you might not have to do an inquiry. So there's hard inquiries and soft inquiries. A hard inquiry is someone else looks at your credit. And if you have even a couple of those a year, it could decrease the points on your credit report, on your credit score, which might hurt you in getting these loans. Or if you stay with the existing company, they might not check that out.
Okay.
So that's why I would say call them first. Now, if you don't have a job, you don't have income coming in, it might be a little bit more complicated. So let me give some other options.
Okay.
If you have a 401k, right now you can get up to $100,000 out without penalty.
Right now, is there a deadline on that? Because I know that's something that has come about since everything that's been happening in 2020. So is there like a deadline on it?
Don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can do it now, as of the time we're recording this.
Yes.
So a second thing is, if you do have cash values, you could actually get money from your cash values that could pay it off. Third is, do you have any family members that are earning next to nothing on their interest rate? That we did this with my grandparents. My grandparents bought a car for one of their grandkids. They did a down payment on a home for another grandkid, and they got higher interest rate from them, even though they weren't going to charge more, because they had really good credit, really good options, and then they could kind of help those people out that they wanted to help out anyway, and get a little bit better interest rate than they were getting in a savings account. So that's an interfamily loan. Is there anyone that you'd be willing to approach and do that with? It reminds me of my college roommate. Him and his brother, their parents financed the down payments on their homes. It doubled the interest rate that they were earning with their certificates of deposit, but it cut in half what they would have had to pay on a normal, getting a second mortgage. So it was a very winning situation, basically cutting the bank out of the picture. So if there's any creative things you can do there, I would look at that too.
How do you go about having those conversations where you reach out to, a brother, a sister, an aunt and uncle, a grandparent, and say, hey, can I borrow some money from you? Like, do you have any advice on how to initiate those conversations, or find out if people are actually in a situation where they could loan you if that's not coming? Because I know in many families that's not, money's not talked about, so.
I went to my grandparents and said, hey, your home's paid off, but if you were to get a line of credit, I'm looking to buy this other property. I could make the down payment with your line of credit. I could pay you, more than the interest rate that you're being charged. And I just open up the conversation that way. I mean, it's not always easy conversations. Usually I would say something like, hey, I'm going to propose something. If at all it's uncomfortable, let's just throw it out and pretend it didn't happen. But I'd rather pay you interest than an institution. I'd rather, I'd rather pay less and pay you guys more by cutting out the middleman. So it's just, I don't know, every family dynamic's a little bit different, but I think it does take a little bit of courage. But I think the more courage we have in our conversations in this world, the better our life gets. So, I wish I had a better answer, No,
that's fine.
When it comes down to it.
You're right. Family dynamics play a big part in it.
Yeah, but I think that there's a lot of financial gurus out there that say you never touch a retirement plan. Well, guess what? Retirement plans have been disappointing by far, and they're not providing a quality retirement. So you have people that are deferring their life while they're paying too much interest. And if you have these high interest rates, who cares about your retirement funds? They're never going to perform at this level. Pay this thing off. Invade those plans. Find access to cash instead of saying, well, I can't touch that because that's my retirement fund. Well, guess what? Right now is the time to invade that, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And it's a way to help make sure that you're set for now, because we're in such crazy times. Life is very unpredictable right now, and it has created a lot of anxiety in people. So if you can invade those retirement plans, like you said, and have a little more peace of mind and access to cash now, it feels like well worth it.
I kind of feel like people are told, oh, well, you need that when you get to retirement. But when people get to retirement, they try to spend any other thing other than a retirement plan, because if you hate paying taxes today, you'll still hate paying them when you're retired. And because those plans are deferred unless they're a Roth IRA, well, then people are going, well, if I pull that money out, I have to pay tax on it. And if they never spend it, it might as well have been 100% tax because they never enjoy it. So help yourself out. But get to the point where you go, why did I accrue this? Was it because I wasn't financially prepared? Was it a circumstance that was so surprising? And what could I learn from that circumstance? And how can I start paying myself first and watch these kind of things and be responsible? Because we all make financial mistakes. I don't care how smart you are. I could go through all of these so-called financial gurus, some I've even interviewed, that have been bankrupt. I could think of two of the biggest names out there that went bankrupt because they made mistakes. We can't judge who we are based upon our financial mistakes.
No.
But the key is we have to understand why we got into the situation, understand what we would do differently, and unfortunately, people don't learn the lesson all the way.
Yeah.
You know, but if you can permanently learn the lesson, like I learned some lessons permanently in 2008. About being overextended, being overly optimistic, about not paying attention to cash flow, by not having enough liquidity because I thought everything I was doing was always going to keep exponentially growing like it had the previous 10 years, and then realized, wait, that doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
So, you know, forgive yourself for the mistakes, do what you got to do, but get clear about why you got in the situation in the first place, and then correct those mistakes. Build liquidity, increase your financial intelligence, and forgive yourself. That's the main steps.
Should you invest or pay off debt? Look, the gurus have it wrong. The talking heads don't know your situation and what's best for you. And look, if you get this wrong, it will absolutely rob you of life enjoyment and wealth. There's absolute bias and a one-size-fits-all mentality for advice on investing versus paying off debt. Again, if you get it wrong, it will cost you. This may be one of the biggest culprits for bankruptcy, divorce, and for sure financial stress. The number one reason listed for divorce is money. In 2008 and again today, one of the biggest reasons for bankruptcy is being over-leveraged. If you watch Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman, they say you absolutely should pay off debt at all costs, ignoring economics, inflation, and this great wealth transfer that's happening right now. Or if you listen to Robert Kiyosaki or Grant Cardone, they say you absolutely should invest and leverage, use debt for acquisition, ignoring investor DNA, peace of mind, and risk management. So, who's right? This is the personal part of personal finance. I don't know why they call it personal finance, and most of the time it should be called transactional finance, and people don't treat it as personal at all. But it really comes down to 5 factors and one simple equation. See, banks are in the business of leverage and debt. Anyone who thinks they don't have time to manage the money, well, they may want to consider paying off debt, but to know for sure, let's dive into these 5 factors. The first factor is what I would call the peace of mind and economics factor. See, how do you feel and operate when you have loans? Does it keep you up at night? Does it create frustration and contention with your spouse or significant other? Is it something that you just absolutely, can't get over and you just wish that it was gone, and if it were, you'd feel like that weight is off your back? So you got to think, how does this impact your family or others with your financial choices that are impacted by those choices and decisions? And even think about things like the economics of an amortized loan that are close to being paid off. What do I mean by that? So say you have a 15-year mortgage and you're 11 years into it. You only have 4 years left, but that payment every single month has stayed the same, even though the balance has gone down, because that's what an amortized loan is. And maybe paying that off would free up way more cash flow than if you invested those dollars. So all this to be said, this comes down to personal preference, personal economics, and your specific situation. Part of what helps is something I would call your cost of money, also known as opportunity cost. Your cost of money is what can you get with your money when you invest it? What is that from a safe and more secure standpoint, net of all your costs and expenses? That's your cost of money. Or for others, cost of money is that really high interest rate you have on a loan that burdens you. Maybe it's this crazy number like 22% on a credit card, or even ones as high as 29%. That's crazy, right? It should be usury. But that's your cost of money, because anytime you don't pay down that loan, it's not just costing you $1 when you spend that money, it's costing you $1.22 or $1.29, depending on the interest rate. So cost of money is, if I pay cash for something, I forfeit the right to earn on that cash. And so what am I forfeiting? What interest could I earn? See, there's always an interest cost, whether we pay cash and forfeit the right to earn it, or whether we borrow it and then we pay for the right to use it. There's an interest cost all the time. So our cost of money is kind of the economics behind everything. What's your actual rate of return after your fees and after your taxes? That's your cost of money. Or what are you paying to borrow that money? But peace of mind, that's a lot more simple, yet even probably more important. Peace of mind is, if I'm in scarcity because I borrowed money, I'm over leveraged, and I think, well, this is the way that these gurus talk about, that peace of mind being decimated destroys my overall quality of life and becomes one of the factors that you really have to consider. So the first one is, what's the peace of mind for you and those you love? And what are the economic considerations? If you're almost to pay off a loan and you just keep making that monthly payment, well, what if you just took some funds, paid that off, and you freed up that cash flow? That's an economic consideration. Peace of mind consideration is, what do you feel like if that loan is paid off? See, Dave and Susie always think, oh, if you pay it off, you're always going to feel amazing. But you know what? I've had no mortgage before in my life. I've had a mortgage in my life. It really doesn't matter. And even to my wife, it doesn't matter. And right now, our mortgage is at 2.75%, where interest rates are north of 7%. So look, I've got pretty inexpensive money. But if my wife is like, I just can't sleep. I feel so frustrated that we have this mortgage. It feels risky. Then I might want to consider paying it off. But because we both have this peace of mind having that, knowing that we have enough cash to pay it off, well, that peace of mind factor is checked off. So now it's economics. Can we do better than 2.75% with relative certainty? And the answer for us is yes. Well, that takes me to the second factor here, and this will help you answer that for yourself, is what is your investor DNA? Where would you invest the money if you have it versus paying off the debt? And does that investment create cash flow today? Because most people investments are locked away for 30 years in a retirement plan, and they don't know whether it's going to work out until they get way further down the road. And then the question with investor DNA is, which by the way, investor DNA is your values, it's your abilities or competencies when it comes to investing. It's the drive that you have and the interest you have in that, and maybe passion that's involved with it, and it's focus. So some people are better investors when it comes to real estate than others. Others are good at acquiring businesses. Some are maybe good at the stock market. Most aren't. Maybe some are really good with tax liens or with cryptocurrencies. I mean, it really depends on where you're investing and what type of investor you are and understanding your investor DNA. Hey, I know I'm interrupting, but it's because if you go to garrettgunderson.com/quiz, you can figure out your money persona. When you know your money persona, you'll be able to make better choices when it comes to your finances, understand where you've made mistakes and missteps and what was the psychology behind that, and really improve how you view money and how you work with other people with different money personas. So garrettgunderson.com/quiz, no charge, discover your results, and go ahead and comment and let us know what it was. And for some people, volatility with investments drive them crazy. It infringes upon that peace of mind that I talked about before. So what return can you sustainably get? What's your investor DNA? How can you become a better investor? And if you have uncertainty with that investing, or you have frustration around if it doesn't quite work out, well, that takes me to the third category, which is risk management. So the first thing is, what are the economics behind this and the peace of mind? For someone that's trying to put money in a retirement plan and they hope with their fingers crossed they might get 10%, yet have a 15% interest rate credit card, the economics doesn't make sense. Pay off that credit card. It'll improve your credit score, which could help you out overall. It'll probably increase your peace of mind. And ultimately, you're doing better by saving 15% than trying to earn 10%. So that's economics versus peace of mind. Second is investor DNA. For me, my investor DNA leads to building videos like this, writing books that I do, businesses that I'm involved in. That's my investor DNA. I'm not great at most real estate. I'm definitely not great with the stock market. So I'm not really invested in those areas. My interest rate, the only one I have is 2.75%. I can use something called cash flow banking, and I can get more than 2.75% with high degrees of certainty. So I still have that cash. I have access to that cash. I'm doing better, so I'm creating something called arbitrage, borrowing at 2.75 and maybe getting 4%. That is a positive return. But this comes down to risk management. What are your chances of success with your investments? If you're taking a lot of risk, you're going and buying shit coins, like Dogecoin or most cryptocurrency coins outside of Bitcoin or maybe even Ethereum, depending on your philosophy and belief in Web3. But there's so many different coins that are out there that were built upon hype with these ICOs. People are buying them thinking they just buy and hold and it was going to skyrocket and they're going to make so much money. Their greed gland kicked in and it wasn't an investment at all. It was completely gambling. So much of that happens within trading within the stock market. People buy options trading programs and click their mouse and hope that they're going to get these huge returns, 5% a month, and they find out they lose all that money. Risk management matters. See, if you were to lose with the investment, what impact would that have on your mindset, on your life, on your relationships? And have you thought with your investments how you can protect your downside? See, if you could earn the same interest rate as you're paying with a loan, well, maybe paying off that loan is the best thing to do because it's certain. You know you're saving that, where the investment might be uncertain. And that takes me to the fourth factor, which is your time management. See, how much time does it take to invest in real estate? When I had a lot of real estate properties, I had to talk to the property managers and the maintenance people, and I had to talk to the attorneys to set up the legal documents. I had to talk to the banks to set up the loans, and I had to go through all this process of gathering my taxes and managing my credit score, and I was doing things I didn't really enjoy, and it took a lot of my time, which had an opportunity cost from doing the things that I did enjoy and the things that I wanted to spend my time doing, but I was so caught up in investing that I wasn't managing my time effectively. So how much enjoyment do you have with the investments that you're making? See, paying something off just frees up that time. Investing requires stewardship, and is it worth your time? So what other things can you do with your time? So as we're considering, should you pay off debt or invest? It comes down to what type of investor are you? What is your investor DNA? What return could you earn versus what do you save when you pay something off? What peace of mind factors do you have? What kind of risks are you facing? And finally, before we get to the solution, the equation that's going to answer it for you, one of the things that is an argument towards borrowing or leaving your loans out there is inflation. See, inflation hurts with most things, but it actually helps with debt. The payment just feels like less of a burden year by year. If inflation is there, and we're like, oh, in 1980, $1 in 1980 acts like $3.70 today, well, guess what? That just means that a loan that you've had for 10, 20, 30 years, each and every year, that feels like less of a burden, less of a loan, less money because there's more money in circulation or more money that's been printed. So leverage in those situations, like can help you acquire assets, and it helps you have that inflation may push the values of real estate up over time, and leverage by borrowing to get that property might give you a lot of opportunity for growth and equity, but it can also increase your risk. Leverage is a scary word for most people because if we leverage our money by borrowing without the knowledge behind it, we gamble. And that gamble can end up being something that leads to bankruptcy, something that leads to a loan that you have to make a payment on, even though the asset isn't worth as much. We saw that in 2008. People had so much high appreciating property, and everybody starts to get in at the wrong time because the wealthiest people go, well, when everybody's in panic, that's the time I'm going to acquire. And when everybody's in greed, that's the time I'm going to sit on the sidelines. Yet there's a collective consciousness where people get so excited, I got to do it because I'm missing out. I got to get into the crypto now. I got to get into real estate because all it is doing is going up. And then all of a sudden it starts to go down. And if you borrow to get into that, that can be a major burden with crippling consequences. Here's the solution, is to understand two things, your indexes. One is your investment index and the other is your cash flow index. Let's begin with your cash flow index. If you're borrowing money, if you have any loan, I want you to look at your cash flow index, which is take as your loan amount and divide it by your monthly payment. So your loan balance divided by a monthly payment creates your cash flow index. If it's a number less than 50, you have a very inefficient cash flow index. If it's higher than 100, you have a very efficient cash flow index. If it's between 50 and 100, you're kind of in the consideration zone of should you restructure, refinance, or is it like that's where you really got to look at your investment index, which is the next thing I'll tell you about. But you want a really high number because what it means is you've borrowed money, but you don't have a very high payment or it's not really negative consequence on your cash flow. So longer term mortgages can be like this, but some people go, yeah, but what about the high interest that you pay on a mortgage of 30 years or interest only over your lifetime? But remember, we always pay interest, whether we borrow money and we pay for the right to keep that money, right, or to use that money, or whether we pay cash and we forfeit the right to earn interest. It comes down to what you can earn versus what you pay. Again, if those numbers are similar, maybe just pay it off and have the certainty. If you have arbitrage where you've borrowed at a much lower rate than what you're earning, you have to look at the time it takes. You got to look at the risks that are involved to understand who you are, to understand your situation here. So the investment index is when we make an allocation towards investing, what is the amount of money that we put in that investment over time divided by the monthly cash flow? Now, most people have no cash flow when it comes to retirement plan or when it comes to their mutual funds because they're just reinvesting, thinking that compounded interest is what's going to be their solution and their savior. But ultimately, I'm in the game of economic independence where you have enough cash flow from your assets to cover your expenses because now every active dollar you earn can build more assets. It's an unfair, amazing advantage. So your investment index, if it's a really high number, it means you're not getting much cash flow. Let's go back to look at the previous example. Cash flow index, when you are the bank you want a low number for the person that borrowed money because it means you have a lot of cash coming in relationship to your investment or the amount of money you put out. When you're utilizing funds from a bank, you want a high number, right? They want the low number, you want the high number, because it means that you don't have a lot that you have to pay every month for the privilege of accessing that money. So it's the same when it's the investment index. You want a low number. You put some money in there, but you're creating a high amount of cash flow off of that, which creates a low number. Now, if you have a high number, it means you have not that much cash flow for the money that you've allocated. So when you look at your cash flow index, you want a high number. When you look at your investment index, you want a low number. It's what are you operating as? The investor or the borrower? That's the question. So what impact would paying off a loan have on your cash flow? If you have a low cash flow index, you might want to pay that off. What amount of cash flow could you create by investing? You want a low number on your investment index because it means you've got a pretty strong cash flow from the amount you've allocated. And the spread of what you're borrowing versus what you're earning during high interest rate environments might be more difficult. If you could borrow money at 1% and earn 2%, that's a 100% markup. But if you have to borrow money at 7% to try to earn 10%, that's only really a 30% markup. We might have to check my math on that, but you know what I'm saying there. So what I'm looking at here is these 5 factors are critically important. Peace of mind and economics. How do you feel about it? And what are the numbers? Number 2, your investor DNA. What kind of investor are you and how can you become a good investor? 3, how do you manage and mitigate your risk so it's more sustainable? 4, how much time does it take when you're making those investments and what other things could you do with your time? And inflation starts to make that debt feel like less of a burden over time. So who's right? It comes down to you. Personal finance is very personal, and that's why we have this YouTube channel. Ask your questions. I like to answer it. Often I'll answer it in video form. But I think going to the lowest common denominator, if you always pay something off, no matter what, that minimizes opportunity. On the other hand, always thinking that leverage is the answer. We've seen people like Rick Edelman, it's always have a mortgage, or Robert Kiyosaki, leverage debt. It depends on you, the person, and your investor DNA. So find out your cash flow index with your loans, compare it to your investment index with where you're putting money. And if those numbers are the same, well, then it's a choice. If you have one that's much higher than the other, then the choice is clear. If you have a very high investment index and a low cash flow index, pay off the loan. If you have a very high cash flow index and low investment index, continue to be an investor, but take into consideration risk, take into consideration the amount of time that you put into this, and ultimately what opportunities are out there for you.
Well, I have a friend, it's a woman, she's about 45 years old, she has $6 million in savings and she rides a bicycle. And in her mind, this is in Hawaii, she is King Tut, she is so happy. And you had $6 million in savings, I'd be pretty happy too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But riding a bicycle would destroy me. She's healthier than I am, which is a good thing too.
Right.
But the whole point here is this. Your financial advice depends on who you are. So if you're poor, Susie Orman. You're middle class, it's Dave Ramsey, live debt-free. Cut up your credit cards. Now we get to the rich. And the rich are opposite. And that's what I cover in this book here, Second Chance. Everything the poor and middle class do, the rich do differently. For example, I don't want to get out of debt. I love debt. Now, it's what I hear a person say to me is, I don't have any money, so I can't invest. Well, that's a poor and middle class thought.
Right.
You see, I don't need my money. The banks will give me all the money I want. And so last year, this year, 2015, we refinanced $300 million of debt. $300 million is not Donald Trump money. It's 1/3 of $1 billion. But we refinanced it down from 5% to 2.5%.
Some nice cash flow.
You know how much money we made refinancing $300 million in debt?
And how cheap is that money? See,
Yeah, and that's what's so funny, right? The money's cheapest before, but Susie's saying get out of debt.
well, here's a really
Or
good
Ramsey was
yeah. Here's a good couple of questions to see where someone's mindset is. I like to ask them, if I'm willing to lend you money at 0%, how much would you take? See, and if someone doesn't tell me they take as much as they can get, I know they're in the middle class or the poverty.
Yeah.
Or if I say, if I'm not charging interest, how fast do you want to pay me back?
Right.
They should be saying, I want to pay you back as slowly as possible.
Debt makes us rich. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
To understand the difference between poor, middle class, and rich, Dave Ramsey is saying live debt-free, and what makes the rich rich is they know how to use debt. That's the difference. That's why in 1973, I came back from Vietnam. My rich dad said, take a real estate course. It had nothing to do with real estate. It had to do with real estate is debt and taxes. And I had to learn how to buy a piece of property using 100% debt. Once I learned to buy a property with 100% debt and still make $25, I knew I could make money off of debt.
Yep.
Whereas Dave Ramsey is saying live debt free, and Susan's saying cut up your credit card.
And what happened to your taxes?
Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, so debt makes the rich rich, right?
Yep.
Okay, now the more debt you have and the more real estate you buy, what happens to taxes?
It's going to continue to go down.
You pay zero tax.
Yep.
Do you understand that what makes again, everything is covered in this book, it's opposite. The more real estate I buy using debt, the less tax I pay, the more money I make. The other thing, so I use debt to get rich, and I pay no tax. This is where you and I really line up. When you were playing the cash flow game, what came out of the game? Wasn't it your team or something?
Oh, yeah. I realized that I had to build a team, and it couldn't just be financial planners or people that gave advice. I wanted people that actually lived it, done it, were wealthy, that spent time with wealthy people. And it took me about a decade to build that team, maybe a little bit longer.
I'm still building.
It was a heavy, and but I got to tell you, it's paid off massively.
Yes.
I mean, that's one of my advantages that most people have is the type of team that I have and that I built. And that's part of what we do is we build teams for people that way.
Right. And this is the part what kills most people, okay? In school, if you operate with a team, it's called cheating.
Exactly.
So tell them what your team consists of today, because it's the same thing I say. My team is called my Rich Dad Advisors, right?
Yeah.
What do you call your
I
team?
call mine the Accredited Network, and in joking, I call them the Financial Nerd Network because these are people that love this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, even part of my team is having a guy that's good at understanding liability insurance. He can he can tell you off the top of his head any contract, how it works, how to transfer risk. It's amazing.
I want you to hear that. On my team too, it's not the Rich Dad Advisor, but I have an insurance guy who reads all the insurance contracts.
Yep. And so he'll say, hey, did you know if we structure this with anyway, not going into content, but with an umbrella, then you're going to save this money and you're going to have $10 million more coverage. I'm going, genius, but that's what he looks for. Then other people I have on my team is like an estate planning and corporate structuring attorney. Right. So my asset protection trust, but he's also someone who's independently wealthy, has done a huge amount of real estate.
He practices what
he's
he
very well connected. He has billionaire clients. So I was like, look, when I start with him, I was one of his smaller clients, but I referred so many good people to him that he brought me into the inner circle and has been great to me.
Who else is on your team?
So on my team, I do have a registered investment advisor that helps me research and analyze deals. And he's also kind of my no guy. Why wouldn't I do this investment? You sniff out what's wrong with it and how we protect it. Then I also have a cash flow specialist that his job is just to look and analyze cash flow and make sure I look great to the banks. So when I go to a bank, I look good because my cash flow's good, collateral's right, credit's there.
So once again, these are big steps, but it's a change of the spirit, the being in here. Because, when I talk about, you should have a team, what stops most people from having a team is in school, you were taught that you have to be the smartest guy.
Yeah.
Are you the smartest guy on your team?
No.
I'm not the smartest guy on my team.
If I were, I'd be in trouble, right? Because you always want a room of people that help you grow.
The most stupid people are people who think they're smart. And I've been that person. I know all the answers. I meet these guys who are PhDs, MBAs, accountants, lawyers. They think they're the smartest guy and they don't ask for help. And I was always a dumb shit in school. So I always ask the smart kids about stuff. So when it comes to investing, I look for the smartest guys that practice what they preach. So they're called Rich Dad Advisors. It's bigger than their advisors. But I have Kenny McElroy, who writes about real estate, but it's really about debt. I have Tom Wheelwright on taxes. And Tom always says the reason people pay taxes is because they're afraid of the IRS. They're afraid of the IRS, and you want to pay taxes? You're middle class. You should really listen to Dave Ramsey at that point.
Yep.
But if you're going to if you want to be rich, you'd better know the laws of taxes, and you'd better be willing to be challenged by the IRS, get an audit, and say, these are the rules. You see, but if you're a coward and you're afraid of the IRS, then you're middle class and poor. This is our whole message.
Well, when I was 22 years old, I went to New York City, and I was able to shadow a high-end financial person. When I graduated college, I spent more money my first year out of college than all 4 years combined on my financial education. After 2 years, I spent more than any brain surgeon spent going to school to assemble a team and get the knowledge. But when I was 22, I had this epiphany. I walked into a family services firm. So you had to be worth $50 million to operate with this firm. But when I walked in, I got to sit there kind of as a fly on the wall. And around the table was an entire financial team. There was advisors, there was fiduciaries, there was attorneys, there was accountants, and bankers, all at one table, making sure to analyze and do the proper due diligence on a deal that was coming through and making sure everything was coordinated so that it wasn't in the individual's name. It was completely something owned by an entity to protect him, that there was downside protection. I said, I have to build that. Now, it was naive when I said that because it was a much bigger situation it took to build that, but I actually created a process.
Okay, so just remember this: you don't have a financial planner, do you?
No.
Okay. And on my team, I have attorneys, accountants, and I have a banker. I have a banker who's the head of one of the largest banks right here. I just call him up and I tell him what I want to do. He'll take my phone call. So really, that's our message to you guys here. Please listen to this. What makes the rich richer is that we use debt as money, we have a team, and we do our best not to pay taxes. Is that the difference?
That's absolutely the difference.
So what are your final words you want to say about it so people understand that? See, that's...
So if you want to just follow the herd, be entrenched in the sacred cows.
Follow the sacred cows. I love it.
Then just cut back, save money, live within your means, and hope that you're going to be okay with the stock market, but be debt free. If you want to follow the rules of the rich, you have to have an amazing team, an intelligent team. And when you do that, you'll pay less in tax because of how you utilize and leverage debt, and it will help you acquire assets, and you focus on cash flow, not on 30 years waiting for retirement to come around.
Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from, so go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.